Chapter 24, Part 2 of J.S. Bach, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. J.S. Bach, Volume 2 by Albert Schweitzer, translated by Ernest Neumann. The Arnstadt, Mühlhausen, Weimar, and Köthen cantatas continued. The cantata Mein Gott, wie lang? Ach, lange, number 155, is also without an opening chorus. It begins with a 12-bar repetition of the same note in quavers, creating an effect of anxiety. Then the soprano sings, quote, Mein Gott, wie lang? Ach, lange, des Jammers ist zu viel. Ich sehe gar kein Ziel, der Schmerzen und der Sorgen. My God, how long, oh, how long? Too great is my distress. No end do I see to sorrow and care. End quote. Quote, Du musst glauben, du musst hoffen. Thou must believe, thou must hope. End quote, say the alto and tenor consolingly, while the bassoon and the cello maintain uninterruptedly one of those curiously extended figures with which Bach symbolizes steadfast faith. A motif in demi-semi-quavers that forms the middle part of the theme, then enters at the words, quote, Jesus weiß die rechte Stunde, dich du mit Hilfe zu erfreuen. Jesus knows the right hour at which to gladden thee with his help, end quote, and its meaning becomes apparent. The theme, in which Bach symbolizes the combination of firm faith and joyful hope, runs thus. The soprano aria, quote, Wirf mein Herze, wirf dich noch in des höchsten Liebesarme. Throw thyself, my heart, into the loving arms of the Most High, end quote, breathes a quite sensuous passion, the wild rhythm of the strings, merges sharply into a long chord, which, however, does not express rest, but trembling and shuddering, while the bass now takes over the passionate theme. This procedure is repeated 5 times. The picture given in the text could not be represented more realistically in music. The solo cantata for bass, Der Friede sei mit dir, number 158, is simple and unassuming. As the title of the copy that has come down to us shows, Bach used it twice, for the purification of Mary and for Easter Tuesday. The text is probably by Frank. In this work, Bach employs no orchestra but merely contrabass, organ, and solo violin. The spring sunshine fills the 2 works that Bach wrote for Palm Sunday and Easter of the year 1715. For the first of them, Himmelskönig sei willkommen, number 182, he had to make shift with the limited orchestra that was all that was permitted during the period of the Passion. He employs only 1 flute and the strings. Nonetheless, he is able to represent musically the word Himmelskönig, King of Heaven, in the orchestral introduction by means of the rhythm of solemnity. With the declamation of the words Himmelskönig sei willkommen, even Matheson would not have been able to find fault. The arrangement of the voices, which Bach repeats twice in the same form, is very interesting. All 4 voices, from the soprano to the bass, repeat the Willkommen in turns. In the further course of the cantata, the passion mood becomes more and more prominent. The tenor aria, Jesu, lass doch wohl und weh, is accompanied by the grief motive. This is followed by a chorale chorus in the style of Pachelbel on Jesu, deine Passion ist mir lauter Freude. The final chorus, So lasset uns gehen im Salem der Freuden, has a striking resemblance both thematically and structurally to the opening chorus of the cantata Sie werden aus Sabe alle kommen, number 65. This is one of the most impressive illustrations of the fact that Bach's greatness consists not in the capacity for manifold expression, but in the fact that he always tries to express the same idea perfectly in the same vein. It is therefore impossible for him to write two different pieces of music to depict a procession, at once joyous and solemn. The Easter cantata Der Himmel lacht, die Erde jubiliert, No. 31, requires an orchestra that in those days would have been thought quite monstrous: 3 trumpets, kettledrum, 3 oboes, taille, tenor, first and second violins, first and second violas, bassoon, first and second violoncellos, and continuo. Words can give no idea of the splendid way in which, in the orchestral introduction, a separate movement worked out on large lines, Bach makes the heavens laugh and the earth rejoice. The opening chorus is gigantic. The bass aria, Fürst des Lebens, starker Streiter, hochgelobter Gottessohn, Prince of Life, puissant fighter, blessed Son of God, is naturally dominated by the motif of solemnity. To prevent anyone spoiling the grave effect by too fast a tempo, Bach expressly marks the movement molto adagio. At the end, poet and musician unite in mystic reveries upon death. Letzte Stunde brich herein, mir die Augen zuzudrücken, lass mich Jesu Freudenschein und sein helles Licht erblicken. Come, last hour, and close my eyes, that Jesus may show me the light of his joy. Sings Frank. To this, Bach writes a glorified cradle song. Over the final chorale again there hovers a glorified voice in the violins and trumpet unisono. We do not know why in the other Easter cantata written at Weimar, Ich weiß, dass mein Erlöser lebt, No. 160, text by Neumeister, Bach employed only violins and the continuo, the latter strengthened by the bassoon. External considerations may have imposed these drastic limitations upon him. In any case, this cantata is 1 or 2 years older than Der Himmel lacht, die Erde jubiliert. Of the Whitsuntide cantatas belonging to the Weimar period, we have only one, Wer mich liebet, der wird mein Wort halten, No. 59, text by Neumeister, and that only in a later arrangement. The instrumentation of the opening duet is curious: 2 trumpets, kettledrum, and strings. In the final aria, we meet with one of Bach's most extravagant joy figures. The text runs, Die Welt mit allen Königreichen kann dieser Herrlichkeit nicht gleichen, womit uns unser Gott erfreut. The world, with all its kingdoms, cannot compare with this glory wherewith God rejoices us. The final chorale has not come down to us. The Weimar period was very rich in Advent and Christmas cantatas. Nun komm der Heidenheiland, No. 61, text by Neumeister, was written for the first Sunday in Advent in 1714. Note: this was the first version. There is a second cantata, No. 62, founded on the old Advent hymn. End of footnote. In the first chorus, Bach undertakes to build up the old Advent hymn into a French overture. He actually gives it the title of Overture. During the solemn first part, Grave, the voices sing in succession the supplicatory line of the chorale, Nun komm der Heidenheiland, then all together they sing, Der Jungfrauen Kind erkannt. The Allegro section, which Bach has marked G, begins with Des wundert sich alle Welt. At the words, Gott solch Geburt ihm bestellt, the Grave returns. Think what we will of the experiment of uniting a French overture and the medieval chorale, the tonal effect of the chorus is wonderful. So also with the final Amen, that takes the form of a chorale fantasia upon the melody Wie schön leuchtet der Morgenstern. The whole work seems to be filled with a sweet and magical youthfulness that even lends a charm to the primitive harmonic structure. The aria Öffne dich mein ganzes Herze, Jesus kommt und zieht ein is thematically interesting. It is developed from the motif. This aria is introduced by the recitative Siehe, ich steh vor der Tür und klopfe an, Revelations 3:20, in which Bach gives a declamatory watchman's call to the bass and accompanies it by rigid pizzicati chords representing the knocking of the expected one. For the sake of this recitative, the cantata should be one of the first to be performed with the object of making Bach popular. On the cover of Nun kommt der Heiland, as is well known, Bach has written a note upon the quote, order of the morning service in Leipzig on the first Sunday in Advent, as it bears also the date 1714. Spitta concluded that Bach had been invited by Kuhnau on the first Sunday in Advent in that year to perform one of his cantatas in Leipzig. A later theory is more probable, that Bach produced the cantata at St. Thomas's at a later date, perhaps during the vacation, on the first Sunday in Advent 1722, after he had applied for the Leipzig cantorate. The fine solo cantata for tenor, Meine Seele rühmt und preist, number 189, for the fourth Sunday after Easter, probably belongs to the later Weimar period. It consists of two exquisitely beautiful arias. The accompaniment is for flute, oboe, and violin. The beauty of the solo cantata, Barmherziges Herze der ewigen Liebe, number 185, for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass for the fourth Sunday after Trinity, is somewhat impaired by the dry, didactic text. The cantata Wachet, betet, seid bereit alle Zeit, number 70, text by Frank, was written in 1716, 2 years after Nun kommt der Heiland. A comparison of the two will show the progress Bach has made in this short time. He has now acquired a means of expression and suggestion so perfect that though in after years he may indeed vary it, he never surpasses it. In Wachet, betet he does not merely set the text to music, but paints a picture of the Last Judgment. In the opening chorus, the trumpet gives its dire summons to humanity to justify itself. In the recitative Erschreckt, ihr verstockten Sünder, he depicts the trembling of the damned who are conscious of their guilt. This immediately ceases when mention is made of the saved, whom the Redeemer takes home with him to bliss. The recitative Ach soll nicht dieser große Tag, with its animated bass, reminds us of the beginning of the cantata O Ewigkeit, du Donnerwort, number 60. In the following aria, at the words Schale, Knalle, letzter Schlag, Bach paints a picture of the end of the world in which he employs his familiar tumult motif. In striking contrast to this pictorial music are the passages that voice the mystic longing of the elect for the end of things. In the aria, quote, Lass der Spötter Zungen schmähen, es wird doch und muss geschehen, dass wir Jesum werden sehen auf den Wolken in den Höhen. Though the tongues of mockers revile us, we shall yet see Jesus in the skies. End quote. The first violin part reminds us strongly of the Laudamus Te in the B minor Mass. Could Bach have had in his mind the passage from the first epistle of Peter, 1:7-8, quote, Jesus Christ, whom having not seen ye love, in whom though now ye see him not, yet believing, ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. End quote. Even more superterrestrial is the music of the adagio that begins and ends the last aria. Quote, Seligster Erquickungstag, Jesus führet mich zur Stille. Footnote. According to Spitta, the cantata in its present form is a Leipzig revision of 1723. This may also be the case with the cantata Der Himmel lacht, die Erde jubilieret, number 31. End of footnote. The cantatas Bereitet die Wege, Bereitet die Bahn, number 132, and Herz und Mund und Tat und Leben, number 147, were intended for the fourth Sunday in Advent. Both texts are derived from Frank's poems. Bereitet die Wege was written in 1715. The passage from the 40th chapter of Isaiah, "In the wilderness prepare ye the way of the Lord," is given out in the bright and joyous tones of a boy soprano, the orchestra playing round it as if with rays of sunlight. In the aria "Ach, bedenket was geschenket," exuberant arabesques in the violin entwine round the vocal part. The text is founded on a verse in the Apocalypse. Quote, "These have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." End quote. Bach takes it in a mystical sense. The final chorale that appears in Frank's poem is omitted. When Bach produced the work in Leipzig, he probably substituted for this another chorale, which would be distributed to the choir on detached sheets, and so has been lost. In St. Thomas's, figurate music was only given on the first of the Sundays in Advent. If Bach desired to perform his Weimar Advent cantatas there, he would have to alter them slightly so as to adapt them for other Sundays. In this case, he did it by cutting out the final chorale and substituting another. He produced the other cantata for the fourth Sunday in Advent, Herz und Mund und Tat und Leben, number 147, in Leipzig on the Feast of the Visitation of the Virgin Mary, altering the title on the cover accordingly. He probably revised the music also, as appears from the division of it into a prima and a seconda parte, for during the early Leipzig years, he mostly adopted the two-part cantata form. In the opening chorus and in the aria Ich will von Jesu Wunden singen, the trumpet is used with magnificent effect. The other numbers are notably delicate and intimate in treatment. They are carried through in flowing triplet rhythms that are especially effective in the two chorale fantasias for chorus and orchestra, Wohl mir, dass ich Jesum habe, and Jesus bleibet meine Freude. We are involuntarily reminded of the opening chorus of the cantata Liebster Immanuel, number 123, which follows the same procedure. In spite, however, of the intimacy of his mood here, Bach never lets pass any opportunity for tone painting that Frank's text may offer him. The alto recitative, Der höchsten Allmacht Wunderhand, speaks of the skipping and springing of the child in Elizabeth's womb at the greeting of Mary. Bach illustrates this in his music by a sequence of convulsive movements repeated throughout the whole number by the oboes in short, disconnected groups. He troubles little about the musical sense of the other words of the number. Again in the aria, Johannes, freudenvolles Springen, erkannte dich, mein Heiland schon. In the cantata Christum, wir sollen loben schon, number 121, he depicts the quivering of the body of the mother who is about to bear the Baptist, only here the painting is still more realistic. The whole character of the Christmas cantata, Uns ist ein Kind geboren, number 142, text by Neumeister, seems to indicate that it was written 3 or 4 years before the two cantatas for the fourth Sunday in Advent. It perhaps dates from between 1712 and 1714. This is probable, among other things, from the somewhat dry declamation and the undeveloped form of the chorale fantasia that forms the final number. The cantata Tritt auf die Glaubensbahn, again number 152 for the Sunday after Christmas, has a succession of declamatory passages that are not free from faults, which is rather surprising as it belongs, according to Spitta, to the year 1715. Bach's determination to be characteristic makes him give the following passage to the bass at the words in Israel zum Fall. The inharmoniousness and rhythmic emptiness of Frank's text are answerable for the defects of the music. That Bach was embarrassed by them is evident from the improvements he tried to make in the text. He turns seinen Glaubensbau gründet into seinen Glaubensgrund leget, in dieser Zeit into zu aller Zeit, nach Leiden und Schmach into nach Trübsal und Schmach. But he assuredly forgave his poet everything in consideration of the dialogue between Jesus and the soul at the end. Quote, Wie soll ich dich, Liebster der Seelen, umfassen? Du musst dich verleugnen und alles verlassen. How shall I comprehend thee, beloved of souls? Thou must deny thyself and forsake everything. End quote. Jesus takes the soul with him to the strains of a wondrous jig, andante. Here Bach's music begins to reveal itself as the art of charm that he afterwards claims it to be in Phoebus and Pan. Spitta, indeed, protests again here that the color of the duet is contrary to the true church style. The cantata opens with a delightful instrumental prelude founded on the step motif. Out of which Bach afterwards made an organ fugue. The choir is not used. The declamatory effects that Bach employed, even at that time when the text permitted them, may be seen in the cantata Gleich wie der Regen und Schnee vom Himmel fällt, No. 18, which dates from 1713 or 1714. The recitative upon the long opening passage from Isaiah 15:10 is an incomparable masterpiece. The declamation is astoundingly effective. Again in the litany, Herr Gott, hier wird mein Herze sein, in which the choir joins 4 times with Erhör uns, lieber Herr Gott. It is a pity that Neumeister, who had a better sense of verbal rhythm than Frank, is so often banal in his ideas. The aria, Mein Seelenschatz ist Gottes Wort, is accompanied throughout by a delightful wave motion that impressed even Spitta. There seems no justification for it in the text, unless we assume that the oft-repeated word net aroused in Bach one of those musical visions that some quite subordinate association would evoke in him when the text he was setting was rather dry and empty. For prelude, the cantata has a powerful sinfonia in chaconne form, built upon the theme. If we remember that in the cantata Tritt auf die Glaubensbahn, No. 152, the instrumental introduction is inspired by the opening words of the text, and that the theme of the Sinfonia of the cantata for Sexagesima Sunday shows the same structure as the motives Bach employs to express steadfast and confident faith, it will not seem an improbable assumption that here he is symbolizing the steadfastness and inviolability of the Word of God that is uttered later. He probably did not compose music with any particular joy. To Frank's text for the 23rd Sunday after Trinity, Nur jedem das Seine, No. 163, it contains neither poetic ideas nor pictorial images. This, to be sure, is less the fault of the poet than of the Gospel for the day, Matthew 22:15-22, that deals with the subject of the tribute money. The religious valuation of tax-paying is not a grateful theme for a cantata text. Bach, evidently in despair, sets the final aria, Nimm mich mir und gib mich dir, in dialogue form, so as at least to work in a duet. The orchestra gives out at the same time the melody, Meinen Jesum lass ich nicht, the final chorale, taken from Heermann's hymn, Wo soll ich fliehen hin, has only a figured bass. Note, The Cantata for the Third Sunday in Lent, 1716, Alles, was von Gott geboren, also belongs to the Weimar period. We do not possess it now, however, as an independent work, Bach having at a later date incorporated it almost wholly in the cantata Ein feste Burg. End of note. In Köthen there was no church music, the court having adopted the Reformed faith. From 1717 to 1723, i.e. from his 32nd to his 38th year, Bach wrote cantatas, if at all, only occasionally and for special purposes. The only two that can be attributed to this period are Wer sich selbst erhöht, der soll erniedrigt werden, number 47, and Das ist je gewisslich wahr, number 141. Their texts are found in a yearly cycle of cantata poems issued by the State Secretary Helbig in 1720. The two themes by which Bach expresses the idea of the fallen being exalted and the exalted falling have already been cited as typical of his method of representation. The pictorial purpose is visible also in the orchestral introduction. See, for example, the fall in the basses in the 5th to the 7th bars. The wonderful feature of this chorus, however, is not its pictorial effects, but Bach's success in making such natural and agreeable music of them. This pictorialism is continued in the two arias. In the first, Wer ein wahrer Christ will heißen, muss der Demut sich befleißen. The first violin gives a picture of the necessary exercises in Demut, humility, the figures being persistently forced downwards in spite of their efforts to ascend. The theme of the oboe and violin in the aria Jesu, beüge doch mein Herze is founded on the same idea. We seem to see the wavy lines of a twig which someone is testing by bending it. Schweitzer believes that Bach wrote this work for Hamburg. In that year, 1720, the 17th Sunday after Trinity, the Gospel for which day is embodied in the cantata, fell on the 22nd of September. Bach, however, did not go to Hamburg until November, his journey having been delayed by the death of his wife. It is thus doubtful whether he produced the cantata then. It is one of the few that he has carefully supplied with phrasing and expression marks. In the Bach-Gesellschaft edition, the solo instrument in the first aria is wrongly given as organo obbligato. It should be the violin. If the cantata is to be performed nowadays, the text of the recitative Der Mensch ist Gott, Staub, Asch und Erde will certainly have to be altered. The cantata Das ist je gewisslich wahr, number 141, for the third Sunday in Advent, is a little obscure. In the first chorus one is tempted to assume that the declamation is deliberately naive, Bach's object being to express by the uniform length of the notes the childlike quality of the confession that's being made. It is extremely effective. The succeeding arias, however, rather rouse the suspicion that Bach has adopted Helbig's text to some music already existing. It is incredible that he should have deliberately declaimed the words Jesu trotz der geistlich Armen in the way he does. Schweitzer thinks that the opening chorus is an arrangement of some earlier duet. Indirectly associated with the Köthen period is the cantata for the third day of Easter, Ein Herz, das seinen Jesum lebend weiß, number 134. It is founded on a Köthen gratulation cantata, the title of which we do not know, the cover of the first sheet of the score being lost. We needs must lament that such beautiful music should have been made impossible by the poor text with which it is associated. A typical case is afforded by the commencement of the first aria. In later years, Bach twice took up this cantata with a view to improving it, as may be seen from the various parts that are extant. He could not, however, alter the chief numbers. Altogether, then, there are about 25 cantatas that we can attribute with certainty to the pre-Leipzig period. End of chapter 24, part 2. Read by Sandra near Montreal, 2021.